For years, manufacturers have tried to find ways to bend the rules of motorsport to find an advantage. Sometimes that means making the tiniest of changes that just about stays inside the rules. Sometimes that means finding a loophole no one else has spotted. One of our particular favourites is the Homologation Special. That is, a road car built entirely to make a racing car legal. There have been hundreds over the years. Sometimes homologation specials are built into the rules, and sometimes they just come from a missed loophole. The GR Yaris may be the final one ever. So, taking a look back, here are 9 that we particularly love. And if you do enjoy this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe for more from Goodwood Road and Racing. GT racing was everywhere in the mid-1990s. The BPR Global Series had taken the top-level GT1 class, well, global, with cars from Ferrari, McLaren, Venturi and more battling for glory. Porsche had been racing already with its lower-class GT2 car, but never fighting for the outright championship. Porsche being Porsche, it didn't want to sit around at the back. It wanted some wins. Some rather clever people spotted a gaping hole in the rulebook and saw an opportunity. It turned out that rather than having to make an out-and-out racing car to some tight rulebook, what it could do was build a racing car, then nail together 25 versions that were just about road legal, and you could pretty much build whatever you wanted. In reality, the 911 GT1 is a 911 in name only. For one thing, the GT1 is mid-engined, with the chassis derived from the 962 Group C race car. The GT1 race car had around 600 horsepower and was capable of 205 miles an hour at Le Mans. The original street-legal Strassen version featured 993 headlights, and just 2 were built, with a promise to competition authorities that more would definitely follow. Eventually, 2 versions later, the 911 GT1 would win Le Mans, before Porsche quit motorsport again. When Ford decided that it wanted to give Group B a go, it originally planned to use a variant of the super successful Escort Mark III. It would be a rear-wheel drive, turbocharged car. But then Audi went and made rear-driven rally cars obsolete. Instead, Ford worked on an all-wheel drive monster, a ground-up rally car with a chassis from the man who designed Jaguar's XJR Le Mans racers. The body was starred by Ghia, and the engine a 450 horsepower 1.8 litre unit from Cosworth. It had all the makings of another Group B beast. To be legal, 200 kits had to be built, and 1 single finished road car. Ford, realising this meant it needed to look like, well, a Ford, raided the parts bin. The RS200 got lights from a Sierra, as well as its door and windscreen. The layout is truly exceptional. The engine is mid-mounted and sends power forwards to a front-mounted gearbox before it's routed through a centre differential to all 4 wheels. That allowed for the low-slung body and short wheelbase that make it look so good. Sadly, it lasted a single season in rallying, with 2 high-profile fatal crashes contributing to the end of the mighty Group B era, and the end of the RS200. Nismo first built a GT1 car in 1995 with the Skyline GTR LM, but it faced an almost instant problem. While Nissan had built its cars to the rules, converting a road car to racing spec, its rivals, Porsche, were smashing the rules to pieces. Nissan decided the best way to beat them was to join them. And in came Tom Walkinshaw, a man legendary for not allowing rules to get in the way of his efforts. The result was the R390, a car styled by Ian Callum, with aero designed by Tony Southgate, and the chassis, tub, greenhouse and roofline pretty much straight out of Jaguar's XJR program. By the time it was finished, no manufacturer was interested in building 25 road cars, so Nissan decided to build one, and it didn't even bother to try and sell it. The road car had the same 3.5-litre twin-turbo V8 as the race car, producing 558 horsepower and a mighty 637 Newton-meters of torque. Acceleration was similar to the 911 GT1, but thanks to a more slippery body, the the road R390 can allegedly do 220 miles an hour, but it seems no one has ever actually tested that out. Group B and GT1 will produce a decent chunk of this list, purely because these were probably the two greatest eras of road-derived racing cars. The greatest Group B car of them all, certainly in terms of actual achievements, was the Peugeot 205 T16. Of course, to rally the car, Peugeot had to make 200 road-going examples, or at least the kits for them. So the T16 looks like a beefed-up 205 riding on higher suspension. In reality, it is so much more than that. The T16 is driven by all four wheels and is powered by a mid-mounted 1.8-litre four-cylinder engine, producing 200 horsepower, or half the power of the rally car. Interestingly, the engine is actually derived from the block of a Peugeot diesel, and the gearbox comes from a Citroën SM. The body was built by Hewlett's, who took standard 205 bodies and chopped them to pieces. But all that trick suspension, mounted onto a tube frame inside the body of the 205, mid-mounted transverse layout and four-wheel drive, pale in comparison to the coolest thing about the 205 T16. The fact that in order to see the engine, you literally lift the whole of the rear body up. Yes, the first, and probably still most iconic BMW M3 was born not of a desire to create the ultimate fast saloon, but to win touring car races. The M3 was presented to the public in 1985 at the Frankfurt Motor Show as a homologation car for both DTM and Group A motorsport. Mercedes had recently introduced the 190e to the DTM, and BMW couldn't let that go without stepping up to compete. So the M3 had a close ratio gearbox, a lighter glass-reinforced plastic boot, aerodynamic alterations for both a small amount of downforce and a lower drag coefficient, and a limited slip diff. The engine was derived from the popular inline-six S38, but with two cylinders lopped off and now revving up to 7,250 RPM. While BMW probably expected to win on the track, the E30 M3 won the Nürburgring 24 5 times, the Spa 24 4 times, and the World, European, British, Italian, German and Australian Touring Car Championships, it probably didn't know the legend it would spawn. The Mitsubishi Evo, the bastion of early WRC spec rallying, made from the boring Lancer road car, it would go on to dominate the... Wait, no. You see, there was, originally, more than one Mitsubishi Evo. In 1997, Mitsubishi planned on having a go at the Dakar. At the time, in order to do so, Mitsubishi needed a relevant road car. It picked the Peugeot, a pretty boring early-era SUV, the contemporary model of which had been on sale since 1991. What Mitsubishi created from it was anything but boring. The Peugeot Evolution is a two-door coupe, fitted with a 3.5-litre V6 normally found in sportier versions of the Galant or Eclipse, producing 275 horsepower. Outside, the Peugeot sprouted a bonnet scoop, massive side skirts, mud flaps, a beefy bumper, and, most excitingly, two seemingly pointless Porsche 917K style fins. An astonishing 2,500 of them were built. Just as with the other cars in this list, there had to be 25 road-going versions to make Mercedes' entry into the already getting out-of-hand GT1 category race legal. Initially, Mercedes built just one CLK GTR, similar to the way Porsche had knocked a single car together to show willing. But when the program carried on into 1998, they had to build all 25. The road car is barely different from the racer, not only to give it a true experience, but also, Mercedes said, to save money. On a car that cost $1.5 million. Powered by a 6.9-litre V12, the only concessions to road usability were the addition of leather upholstery, the offer of air conditioning, two tiny storage bays under the doors, and a little bit of traction control. Because it would have been embarrassing to see 25 millionaires end themselves in CLK GTRs. Mercedes sold the lot, and so decided to make the last 6 roadsters. Because what's more comforting to drive than a purebred racing car that's had some of the chassis rigidity cut out? And then, Because 612 horsepower, 775 newton meters, a 214 mile an hour top speed and 0 to 62 time of 3.8 seconds on offer wasn't enough, AMG built an even faster one. The CLK GTR Supersport had a 7.3 litre V12, an engine later used in the Pagani Zonda, and 664 horsepower. There are only 5 Supersports, so good luck ever seeing one on the high street. What do you do to make the mighty Sierra Cosworth a completely unbeatable track monster? Well, you upgrade the turbocharged 4-cylinder engine so it produces 225 horsepower and 277 newton meters. Add a bigger intercooler, update the suspension and cooling, change the spoiler and front bumper and add more fuel injectors. Then, you build 500 of them to homologate it to go racing and dominate the Australian, German, Japanese, New Zealand and British Touring Car Championships, as well as the Spa 24, Bathurst 1000, Sandown 500 and RAC TT. The Sierra RS 500 has gone down in legend as part of the real genesis of modern fast European Fords. Oh, and it even won the Tour de Corse in 1988 in the hands of Didier Auriol. This is perhaps the ultimate homologation rule bender. Porsche and Dauer, a team that raced Porsches in Group C, realised they could slip a Group C car through a loophole in the regulations for Le Mans. You see, the ACO, which runs the race, had not included a minimum number of road-going cars to their Grand Touring rules. That meant that rather than building a long series of production cars to then adapt for racing, you really only needed to build one. And it could therefore be basically a prototype sitting outside of all the rules. Dauer had already started modifying their remaining 962 chassis to sell as the ultimate street car, and some bigwigs at Porsche looked at the rules, looked at Dauer, and had an idea. Astonishingly, the only modification that needed to be made to the 962 cars that had won Le Mans in 1986 and 1987 for the ACO to consider it a road car was the addition of luggage storage. In the end, because the air restrictor for the GT class was bigger than it was for Group C, the Dauer car was more powerful than the old 962. Even more astonishingly, the car is not the only road car based on the 962. Australian Vern Schuppen also built his own one. His didn't go on to win Le Mans though. Those are our favourite homologation specials ever. But what are yours? Let us know in the comments below.